Hey guys, today we're going to examine how the My Hero Academia timeline might have changed if Oboro Shirakumo was never killed during his second year at UA. For those that don't know, this character is someone who studied alongside Present Mic and Aizawa, and their friendship was explored deeper in the Vigilante spin-off manga. If you're interested, I did a separate video explaining their backstory that you can check out later if you want to find out more about this, because those events fundamentally changed who Aizawa became as a person. Looking back, Oboro's death had a massive impact for both heroes and villains, and when I sat down to think about it, it was clear to me that things actually turned out better with him being gone. I don't know if any of you have been watching Loki recently, but if Shirakumo had survived, it would have been the Nexus event to end all Nexus events, as the timeline would have branched off in the worst possible way. In this video, I'll break down why him being alive opens up many awful possibilities, including Aizawa not becoming a teacher, Deku never receiving one for all, and All Might having terrible things done to him by All for One. Before we begin, be sure to like this video and hit that sub button as we are on the road to 400k subs, so I would genuinely appreciate it a lot. Also, manga spoiler warning ahead, as in order to explain this stuff, we do have to discuss content from My Hero Academia and Vigilantes. Okay, so starting with how Shirakumo died in the main timeline, he and Aizawa were doing a work study over the summer, when suddenly a giant villain called Garvey went on a rampage. Several heroes tried and failed to stop him, and among the fighting a building was destroyed, with the rubble then falling down in the direction of these kids. Had no one done anything, then they definitely would have all been crushed, but it was Oboro that used his cloud quirk to save them. The cloud he created was dense enough to protect them from the falling debris, but because he was so distracted, he was unable to avoid the rock that fell on top of him. That was the fatal blow that ultimately killed him, and the consequences of his death would be felt all the way up till the present day of the series. At some point before he was meant to be cremated, Shirakumo's corpse was stolen by All for One as he wanted to use the cloud quirk for his own purposes. By working with Dr Garaki, the two bad guys tinkered with Oboro's body and mind until he became the intelligent nomu known as Kurogiri, with multiple quirks being fused into him. The original cloud ability was transformed into one that could teleport groups of people to specific coordinates, and as we've seen over the years, this has been crucial to the villain's plans. Kurogiri also served as a mentor and also kind of like a butler to Shigaraki, and he said that his mission in life was to make sure the boy was okay, which is a personality trait that remained from when he used to be Shirakumo. Back in UA, Shirakumo was always making sure others weren't left behind, whether it was this abandoned cat that he found and then temporarily adopted, or whether it was an unconfident teenage Aizawa, who he would constantly be trying to cheer up. After Oboro's death, Aizawa gave up on his dream of starting a hero agency with his friends, and instead put all his energy into training to become an independent underground hero. It's implied that he trained virtually non-stop for 2 years, and upon graduation he immediately left to start doing his own thing. If Oboro had survived, there's absolutely no chance things would have turned out the same for both Aizawa and the League, so let's examine what might have happened. For argument's sake, let's say in this new timeline Shirakumo made a cloud that stopped the debris that was meant to kill him, and after that he joined his friend in the fight against Garvey. Together they would have certainly won this battle, considering that Aizawa was able to win it single-handedly in Vigilantes, and with Oboro helping him the odds would have only increased. They knew how to effectively use their quirks at the same time, and after taking down this massive villain, Aizawa and Shirakumo would get a ton of great press. After all, Garvey was someone so powerful that he took out multiple pro heroes, so for two students to defeat him, I mean that would be a story that would be heard all across the country. This scenario is different to when Aizawa beat Garvey by himself, as the victory was overshadowed by the fact a UA student actually died. In this new timeline, they would have gained the respect of a lot of people, including His Purple Highness, who was of course the hero they were interning with. His Purple Highness already knew they had potential, but after these events and them getting all this great press, I think he would have made them a permanent offer to become his sidekicks after they graduate. This would be an offer the boys wouldn't refuse because it was literally part of their existing life plan to work there in the future anyway, and in chapter 62 they said they planned to one day permanently join the Purple Revolution agency, and then after that they would start their own agency with Present Mic. His Royal Highness was especially known for helping his trainees to go independent and do their own thing, so like I said, it's a no-brainer they would accept this as it would help them in their overall dream. Moving on, something I think is relevant is that Midnight was also a fellow intern at the Purple Agency. In fact, she was the one who got them hired in the first place. During the manga, Shirakumo would blush virtually every time he interacted with her, and yes, some of those times might have been because she was half naked, but crucially, even when she was in full school uniform, this guy was still doing it. Again, read chapter 62 of Vigilantes and you'll see clearly that he had his eyes on her, and after defeating Garvey he might have had enough of an adrenaline rush to ask her out. Whether Midnight would agree to that is a different question, but she did make a point to say that she didn't want to be single forever, and with both of them working at the same agency, I think that for once this is a ship that actually had a chance of happening. Now, when it comes to Aizawa, his confidence would skyrocket in the months after the incident, as his self-belief would be higher than it's ever been. He always used to perceive himself as a weak person with an average quirk, but his work-study experience would have proven he's the real deal to everyone including himself. With the knowledge that he's now guaranteed to become a sidekick, it's rational that Shota would try to improve on the weaknesses that his future boss has pointed out. In particular, he told Aizawa that he drastically needed to improve his smile, and this is something I unironically think he would have spent a lot of time trying to master before he graduates UA. Along with that, he and Shirakumo would continue to train together in the joint battles, and overall Shota would just be a much happier person. A lot of his serious demeanor in the main timeline was shaped by Oboro's death and the experiences that came after that. However, in this new timeline, his attitude would be completely different, and I think he'd be a lot more positive but still humble, maybe similar to someone like Ojiro or maybe a more toned down version of Kirishima. Anyhow, this is the point in the video where things take a dark turn, because I'm going to break down why Shirakumo surviving isn't so great for society as a whole. In chapter 270 of the main series, Dr Garaki revealed that back in the day when he made Kurogiri, he actually wanted Aizawa's Erasure quirk instead. This lets us know that Shirakumo was not the first choice to be turned into a nomu, and they only did it since his death presented an opportunity, but in reality it was Shota who was the preferred option. Had Oboro never died, then it's probable the villains would have hatched a plan to not only steal Erasure, but to turn Aizawa into a nomu that they could use for years to come. Admittedly though, this wouldn't be an easy thing for the villains to accomplish, as capturing a well-known UA student is bound to draw unnecessary attention. If they kidnapped Aizawa, then the heroes would definitely put a team together to search for him, which opens up the possibility of Dr Garaki's secret lab being discovered. From AFO's point of view, that isn't worth the risk, so the best option for success is to use Gigantomachia. In a flashback, we once saw that Gigantomachia was sent to find the Springer Hero Agency, only for his master to then show up with the Spring-like Limbs quirk a few years later, implying that Machia is occasionally sent on these quirk-stealing missions. I reckon once Aizawa becomes a permanent sidekick at the Purple Revolution Agency, Machia will be ordered to attack it and make sure Shota is killed. With Dr Garaki's extensive medical connections, he can then gain access to the body and swap it out prior to cremation, just like he did with Shirakumo, and by doing it this way, it means that no one will ever know Eraserhead's body is in their possession. Soon after, Shota's quirk factor would be harvested by All For One, with the Doctor making duplicate versions that will be given to future high-end nomus. AFO himself would take possession of the original Erasure quirk, while the nomu Aizawa would be given a copy of Erasure along with other abilities as well. The aim would be to experiment on him until he turns into something resembling Kurogiri, as they would want an intelligent nomu given that Shirakumo never died in this timeline. The new Kurogiri would have a different set of powers that are based around Erasure, such as maybe a quirk where he doesn't have to blink because his eyes are always hydrated, or maybe, another one where he gets to zoom in at people who are far away. If you have any suggestions for what type of quirks you might have, then let me know in the comments below, but remember, it has to be related to helping Erasure and amplifying that power. Anyway, in the main series, All Might and AFO fought around 6 years prior to the first episode. However, in this new timeline, All For One would fight him as soon as he gets his hands on Erasure. This quirk straight up changes everything, as AFO could catch the symbol of peace by surprise, erase One For All, and then beat him to a pulp with his multiple quirks. All Might would have no clue that All For One would have stolen Aizawa's power, so there wouldn't be time for him to make a backup plan. And also, given that Sir Naitai was never allowed to see his future, neither of them would know what was going to happen. Chapter 305 revealed that All For One tried at least 2 times in the past to steal One For All, and this is something he'd no doubt want to try again. The problem is that if he really wants to steal it, he needs to have enough raw emotion to override the will of the 7 previous users, but for a sociopath like All For One, that is just impossible. Just like in the main series, he'd know he has to rely on someone else to do it for him, but at this point in the timeline, Shigaraki would be way too young. To get around this, the villains could capture All Might's half-conscious body and restrain him underground, with Aizawa the Nomu being tasked to watch over him 24/7. With Aizawa watching, All Might would be quirkless for the foreseeable future, and his injured body would deteriorate as time goes on. To the outside world, it would seem like he disappeared without a trace, but I think most people would assume that All Might abruptly retired, because in Vigilantes they did say that many heroes go into hiding when they're done, especially ones like All Might who go around making enemies. Of course, not everyone would believe that, but regardless, his absence would lead to Japan gradually descending into chaos. As the country suffers, a helpless All Might would be locked away with his quirk constantly being erased, while AFO would be busy raising a successor who would be hateful enough to override the spirits of One For All. This would take many years to accomplish, possibly over a decade or more, but eventually Shigaraki could reach a point where he is able to steal the power. By the time this happens, Japan would already be a chaotic and lawless place just like All For One intended, and by having Shiggy take One For All, the villains would quite literally be invincible. In this timeline, I think the Midoriyas might have actually left the country to live wherever the hell Deku's dad has been this whole time, as it would be way too dangerous for them to stick around. The remaining heroes would likely try to maintain some sense of order in the country, but even in the main series we saw how quickly hero society can be torn apart. Without All Might, villain groups such as the Shihisaikai and Liberation Army would continue to grow in influence, and it would be up to the old Endeavor to, lead the heroes against these enemies. I personally don't see that turning out too well, and once AFO takes over Shigaraki's body, then it would truly be game over. With this new vessel, he would have the combined power of One for All and All for One, not to mention an army of higher nomu and gigantomachia, so whichever way you want to look at it, there would be no one powerful enough to stop AFO from turning Japan into a dictatorship. It's possible you might see foreign heroes like Captain Celebrity trying to intervene, but more likely anyone who would try to defeat AFO would be killed themselves. This is all a realistic possibility that might have played out had Shirakumo not died back in the day, so maybe what happened to him in Vigilantes was a necessary evil. Be sure to let me know down below what you think might have happened and also what quirks Nomu Aizawa would have gotten, and don't forget to hit that sub button if you haven't already. Until the next one, peace out.